This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 25th of May 2021, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, help is here, I promise. Standard, Ruto truce fails to stop hustler fight. And the Star, Bashir wired millions to Somalia. Sources.
Yes.
I think we'll start with the Standard today. 2J, do you want to tell us what happened during the day that had an impact on our headline?
Yes. So today, a very curious hashtag appeared on Twitter, claiming to have carried out a survey in Gemma counties. The poll was dubbed the Gemma Popularity Index, and it took to the ground in the Mount Kenya region to, and I quote, establish who among the leaders of Mount Kenya is the most preferable choice as kingpin. So the results found that Moses Kuria is the most popular Mount Kenya politician with a rating of 33%, followed closely by President Uhuru Kenyatta at 29%.
Is that right?
And a distant William Kabogo in third place with 7% popularity. I think we'll put up the chart for you guys to see what else came up with their results. So now that I've outlined what their research concluded, I want to make some observations and hypotheses, because everything about this poll smells very suspicious. So observation number one, the company that carried out this research project goes by the name of Statistics Kenya. Very original. Personally, I was unable to find out anything about where this company is, who runs it, and what their quantitative background is. In fact, the Twitter handle that released the results has existed since 2018, but tweeted for the very first time today. This tells me that this poll and its trending hashtag were created to serve only one purpose. In my view, we'll probably never hear from Statistics Kenya again. Observation number two. The companies say that the interviews took place between March 17th and May 21st. That is a 65-day survey. Now, anyone with a basic background in statistics and quantitative analysis would tell you that this is far too long to conduct a political poll and then call it sound. Here at the Fort Hall School of Government, we are guided by numbers, and in this case, we are not convinced. So this leads me to my hypotheses. One, I'm of the opinion that Statistics Kenya and this Gemma popularity poll was sponsored by Moses Kuria. I say this because I am guided by the maxim, cui bono, who benefits. So consider this. Moses Kuria just enjoyed a big win in Juja, the by-election. But he's also in the middle of a power struggle for the soul of the hustler nation, as the Standard tells us. And finally, there is a power vacuum in the Mount Kenya region that someone needs to seize. To me, all of this indicates that Kuria wants to prove himself. If Kuria is behind this index, I actually applaud him. And hypothesis number two, I want to submit that maybe the Gemma nation is waking up to what life after 2022 might look like.
Yeah.
We've said this before. Kikuyus do not know how to be outside of power. And because of this, they need to start playing politics now. Yes, this index smells of self-indulgence, but I think it might actually spur some healthy competition, especially for someone like Justin Muturi, who according to this poll was ranked at 0.5 popularity despite being coronated just the other day.
Yeah, very,
so hopefully,
very suspicious.
Very suspicious.
In fact, I'd like to remind us of something that I talked about last week, political truths, which are the truths that you repeat, even though they're lies, until someone believes them.
Yes.
So I agree with you. The person to benefit from this poll, it may not be true, but if he keeps repeating it long enough, then Gemma will believe it.
Yes.
So let me speak about the perceived militarization of our civil service, or functions that are traditionally carried out by the civil service. Yesterday, President Kenyatta opened the refurbished KMC factory in Athi River, Machakos County, in spite of an imprudent court order by Judge Anthony Mrima in February that it was illegal for KMC to be transferred to KDF because of a lack of public participation. Truth is this, dear Kenyans, we have one of the best civil service in the continent. It is well educated, it is professional, and it even is innovative in its own archaic sort of way. But you know what? The civil service of ours has been corrupted over years and demoralized by our political class. The political system has gotten them accustomed to the Moi style of patronage politics. So, in handing over functions to the military, the president is attempting to salvage our civil service. And what he's trying to do is to show the civil service by example what ought to be done through the ways of the military. During the president's first term of office, he gave the civil service a test. He was testing them. And it was the test that we are told in the biblical story of the parable of the talents. In that story, as you may recall, the man who had received 5 bags of gold doubled them and gained 5 bags more. The one with 2 bags of gold doubled them and gained 2 more. The man who received 1 bag dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. He did not reproduce it. Upon the master's return, those who multiplied the money were put in charge of many things. And he who did not was condemned. He was called wicked and lazy, and he was fired. Now, this is a story on management, and nobody can argue in Kenya today with how amazing the story of transformation once KDF takes over some of these functions is. Just yesterday, Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., somebody who's been a critic of Jubilee, of Uhuru Kenyatta, he said as much. KMC workers and livestock farmers are happy with the new management. The abattoir now will be culling 1,000 cows a week, over from about 7 a day. Payments are supposed to be issued in 72 hours. There's progress all around. One last example, the president even spoke about himself during a meeting with the youth last year. He gave the example of the rehabilitation of MV Uhuru in Kisumu. And he went down there and he asked, can we rehabilitate MV Uhuru? And he was told by the civilians, these people who have no discipline, people who are just corrupt cartels, he was told it will cost 3 billion shillings to revive MV Uhuru. The military came and told him, boss, we will do it at just a fraction of that price. We will do it at 10%. It cost the military, KDF, 300 million to rehabilitate not only MV Uhuru, but also the port of Kisumu. It's employing over 4,000 people today. It has restored jobs and livelihoods in that place. That is the benefit of bringing KDF into managing our affairs.
It's a lesson in efficiency. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And how best to use the resources that you have. Why spend 3 billion when you can spend 300?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They have more efficiency and they are men of principle and discipline. Therefore, you don't need to school them on that. So I'd like to end with a thought on the judiciary. This is inspired by the Daily Nation. Yesterday, the judiciary engaged in something new and different. They held the first public assumption of office ceremony for Chief Justice Martha Koome. At that ceremony, CJ Koome inspected a guard of honor and was handed the instruments of power, including the original copy of the Constitution, the judiciary flag, and the State of the Judiciary report. I have 2 comments to make. My first comment is on the ceremony itself. And on this, I'd like to say that assumption of office ceremonies have not traditionally been a part of normal business in our judiciary. Until yesterday, the assumption of office of the CJ has been an internal affair, while the swearing-in ceremony of the CJ or other judges is only a few degrees also from being private, since it happens in State House and the focus is on the taking of the oath of office. The ceremonial element, I think, is created by the presence of the president and other senior officials such as the AG. The public then watches the ceremony on TV. But I think that this is now changing and the public is now welcomed into the private world of justice, and inaugural speeches may become in the future the subject of analysis because they will give us an insight into the legal philosophy of any appointee. My second comment is on the remarks by the former Chief Justice CJ Maraga at this inauguration ceremony. He advised Lady Justice Koome by saying that, Madam Chief Justice, please keep reminding all of us, especially that especially everybody, that constitutional power is constrained power, so that everybody keeps to his or her lane. And this is a reference to the doctrine of separation of powers, and it is great advice that Maraga himself should have kept.
Yes,
And it is true that each branch of government should limit itself to its sphere of authority, or stick to its lane, as Maraga said. But Madam CJ should know that she has her work cut out for her in reining in the encroachment of the judiciary on the other arms.
Yes.
The court should refrain from dabbling in politics, because courts are not readily capable of managing the resolution of large-scale political problems. This is because courts require deliberation and elaborate processes before any decision can be made. And this heavy reliance on pomp and procedure is inconsistent with the immediate operational decisions needed to run a country. So yes, you should stick to your lane. And back to the ceremony, after JM's comments on the militarization of the civil service, I'd like to say this. I also feel like the things that the judiciary did yesterday by holding a guard of honor and passing symbols across were an encroachment into executive functions.
Yes.
A guard of honor is a very symbolic thing, because it shows that the executive has control over the instruments of violence. And I think that's a question mark.
Yes,
But you know, as Raphael Tuju said the other week, it's a question of interdependence, and that's what people in the judiciary should remember. As soon as you make that judgment, you're going to be escorted by a police officer home. So, you know, you better really think carefully.
through.
Stick in your lane, right?
Aggressing some of these people in the executive unnecessarily and unjustly.
Exactly. We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines for you. We ask ourselves three questions. Is the headline topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Please toss the Daily Nation.
Help is here, I promise.
It's such a cheesy, empty headline.
Okay, God.
Yeah, sorry.
Between the Standard, the Star, Bashir wired millions to Somalia sources, and the Standard, Ruto truce fails to stop hustler fight, I still say we don't have a winning headline.
I would agree.
I agree.
We have no winning headline. And now on to our final thought. But before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the like button.
And now our final thought. This week is inspired, the whole week in fact, is inspired by a book entitled On Heroes, Hero Worship and the Heroic in History by Thomas Carlyle. So the great man theory was initially proposed by Scottish philosopher and essayist Thomas Carlyle in 1840 in a series of lectures which were collected into this book the following year. So Carlyle's great man theory posits that history is shaped by singularly great individuals whose uncommon abilities have a decisive effect on the course of events in history. The phrase, "great leaders are born, not made," sums up the basic principle of this great man theory of leadership, that you're either a natural born leader or you're not. Quite black and white. So in this book, Carlyle saw history as having turned on the decisions, works, ideas, and characters of heroes, and he gives an analysis of these 6 types of heroes. The hero as a divinity, as a prophet, as a poet, as a priest, as a man of letters, and then finally the hero as king. So in terms of leadership, the theory rests on 2 primary assumptions. That great leaders are born possessing certain traits that enable them to rise and lead, and that great leaders can arise when the need is called for them to be great.
Yeah.
So today we begin with the hero as king, and we'll look at the life of Oliver Cromwell, but also Napoleon. So Oliver Cromwell was a political and military leader in 17th century England who led parliamentary forces in the English civil wars. So he served as Lord Protector, or the head of state, of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland for a 5-year period until his death in 1658. And this man was known for being ruthless in battle, but he also led successful efforts to remove the British monarch from power. Very few people know the story of this man. So in the summer of 1642, we see the outbreak of the First English Civil War between the royalists and supporters of King Charles I, who claimed that the king should have absolute power as his divine right as king, against the parliamentarians who favored a constitutional monarchy. So Charles I ultimately surrendered, and Cromwell actually signed the death warrant for the king. And Cromwell's rule as Lord Protector was very short-lived, And his legacy has been quite complex. On one hand, he has been labeled as ambitious, as an ambitious schemer and a hypocrite corrupted by power. But on the other hand, he's been praised as a political visionary who was inspired by God to reform government, law, and society. So the book doesn't answer, this dichotomy, but I was left with a blurred line between being a hero and a villain. I don't know if we'll ever get the answer for that.
I don't think you'll ever get, because I think that a good hero has to be part villain. There has to be something about them that is unbending.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But before I even speak about Napoleon, the thing about leaders is we are all leaders in our own right. And leadership is not being able to stand on a podium and really, speak at people eloquently in a charismatic manner. But leadership is also leading by example.
Yeah.
And people who are good at what they do, if you're good at art, good at songs and, playing instruments, you're sort of leading in your own capacity. So I really do believe that each and every one of us human beings with talent is a leader in that right and has the capacity to be influential. But a little bit on Napoleon. So some interesting facts about him, this hero, this king. First, French was not his mother tongue. Can you believe it?
I didn't.
He only learned French at the age of 9 when he was sent to boarding school. In fact, it was not his second language, but his third.
Wow.
He originally came from Corsica and was recognized at the time by French nobility, the Ancien Regime. So on that basis, he was admitted to a military boarding school, and Bonaparte then came out an officer, and a very good officer, a courageous one. And soon after that, he was sent into battle. He triumphed at the siege of Toulon, and he was promoted from captain directly to general at the age of 24, and then first consul of France at the age of 30, and the emperor of the French at 34.
Wow.
Truly a hero in that right. Number 2, Napoleon was a genius. He had an incredible ability for pretty much everything he applied his mind to. For example, he was able to dictate, we're told, 5 letters to different secretaries at the same time, alternating among them and never losing his train of thought.
Wow.
And he was able to do that for 14 hours even straight at a time through sleepless nights. So he didn't get much sleep. And apparently the only person who could keep up with that ability was his chief of staff, a guy by the name Louis Alexandre Berthier. Number 3, he was also an administrative genius. He presided over some of France's best engineering, in particular the best explosives at the time. And there's an academy that he set up, the Polytechnic School. It was a branch of the military, and it created and nurtured, in his time, to make sure that French military technology was the most superior of its time. And that culture, it lived on, and it's actually what sustained and propelled France to win during the First World War and defeating Germany. Finally, number 4, the legal system that he set up was legendary, and we hear about this all the time. Napoleonic Code is best known for defining that concept of equality before the law, and also securing the right to property, private property. And that code also abolished the feudal system and freed the French peasants from serfdom. And in fact, that law is partly what gave rise to the basis of modern egalitarian law, as well as the UN Charter of the 1940s. But it was also extremely misogynistic. A fun fact here. He cracked a joke about his Code Civil. Women had all the power already, so his legal code removed all their rights.
Really?
Yeah. So ultimately, women have the last sort of call, I mean, they're the ultimate power, according to him. But for me, honestly, reading this book, Napoleon was a hero because, according to him, impossible was nothing. He believed that anybody could achieve anything they wanted as long as they worked hard. And he kept telling his officers and soldiers to believe that as well. And he was the best example of that, similar to Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and so on and so forth. And that's why we remember him as hero and as king.
let me conclude this. Although both Oliver Cromwell and Napoleon ruled nations, neither was, strictly speaking, a king. And it is possible that the author chose them to represent not the traditional monarchy, but the reinvention of kingship in the era of revolutions.
Yeah.
Those two men typify two revolutions, the English Civil War and the French Revolution, that overthrew the monarchy in France and that turned both England and France into republics. The two men, Cromwell and Napoleon, represent a shift from the hero as a wielder of swords to the hero as a lawmaker and a defender of the law. So under the guidance of these two heroes, the law became the enforcer of a new social order, and people obeyed the hero because he propelled them with the weight of the law and the force of his military. So because the two heroes mentioned this chapter are typical strongmen in the sense that we understand leaders today, for me they also typify future quasi-military leaders like Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. But I'd also like to share a criticism made of the author. So according to the author, Thomas Carlyle, great men make history. In fact, and I think you quoted this too, Jay, the history of the world is but a biography of great men.
Yeah.
But according to Herbert Spencer, he was a contemporary of the author, he said that before he, the great man, can remake his society must make him.
Yeah.
And this sentiment was echoed by German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who rather than praise great men for changing their societies, he praised the society that produced the great men. So I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the great man or the society. Anyway, well, it is true that we are all influenced by our context. We cannot downplay the impact of heroes, especially the African heroes as kings that fought off the colonizer, like Shaka Zulu, or those who agitated for our independence, like Kwame Nkrumah or our own Jomo Kenyatta.
Very true, yeah. This will be an interesting week.
It
Hopefully
will.
somebody brings up a great woman.
Yes, I know.
Right?
They've been written
Catherine
out of
the Great.
Catherine the Great.
Yes, Catherine the
What
Great.
we've done before, and so many Elizabeth I.
Yes, Cleopatra, yeah.
I do like that. I'd like us to also focus on great women of history. And speaking of great women, first of all, we did not have a winning headline, and we didn't even look at the cartoons. You can look at them for yourself. Speaking of great women, I'd like to have a quote dedicated to Madam Chief Justice Kome and the Judiciary. It's from Winston Churchill, and it speaks to that sticking to your lane. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen.
Yeah.
I like that.
Do have a great evening.